Hi, I'm Alan. I'm from Tails. I'm going to try and make this a bit more interactive than some other talks I sometimes go to. So sorry in advance. First, how many people here have heard of Tails? Wow. How many people have heard of Tails and not just from the first DBT meetup? Okay. How many people have a dog? Good. You guys should definitely hear of Tails. More importantly about DBT. So I think there's probably about 3 categories of people here. So we've probably got some people who are looking at DBT but haven't actually dipped their toe in yet. We've got some people who are probably in proof of concept-y stages. You've started deploying, you've kind of using it a little bit, maybe in some teams, but you haven't rolled it out properly, or it's in some kind of sandbox. And we've probably got a third group of people who are like using it. So how many people are in group 1? Nice. How many people are in group 2? They're all at the back. How many people are in group 3? And there are people from my team not putting their hand up in group 3. Oh dear, they're going to get picked on later. It's okay. So I'm Alan. Tails, we make dog food, if nobody's come across us before. We are subscription, online, tailor-made pet food. You come to our website, you tell us a load of details about your dog. We take that data and we use it to generate a blend of food specific to your dog, and then we ship it to you every month. We're just in the UK and France. Sorry, guys, in the US. So I wanted to start out a little bit with where we're at on our DBT journey before I come back, and I'm going to touch on a lot of the themes we touched on in the first talk. So currently, we have been using DBT for about 19 months. I said 18 months on the first slide. Sorry. We have 476 models as of Monday. We've probably got some more by now. We have been through 2 data warehouses. We started with Redshift, and we've since used DBT to help us move from Redshift into Snowflake. We have 8 regular committers, and that's committers that are committing every week for the last 8 weeks. We have, on average, over the last 8 weeks, asterisk in the bottom corner if you want my stats, average 34 commits a week. Bear in mind, we currently deploy automatically, so each one of those commits has led to a new deploy of DBT. And we have hourly deploys, every hour, every day, every week, every year. That's currently where we're at. But why? So, and I think this is what I want to hopefully frame this whole talk about, and this is one of the parts of audience participation of, well, why did we come to DBT? What was the problem we were trying to solve? I'm going to start with what problems you guys are trying to solve. So, just shout them out. What are some of the kind of problems you're trying to solve with DBT? Don't be shy. What do you say? Order? Bringing order to chaos. Yep. Any other shouts? Reuse. So we're trying to reuse bits of code that other people have built and not have duplication of logic in lots of different places. Anything else? Sorry? Oh, yes. To be more agile, to move faster. Yes, I'm going to come back to you. This is good. Anything else before I move on? Yes, and I'm also going to come back to that. This is good. We're doing well. I'm going to talk about the things you want to talk about. Data quality. Yes. So we came to DBT, and actually very fortuitously at a point in our journey when we were looking for something to help us centralize and democratize our business logic. Democratize is a word that gets overused a lot of time. Really, it just means more people can edit it. We had multiple different systems, all that had different bits of logic in different places, and it was becoming a headache to manage. And we wanted to take that logic and put it in one place so that everyone could do it, and there was one single version of the truth, that we reused the definitions. We didn't have, and for us, the things that matters are orders, dogs, pets, subscription lengths. We had one definition for whether a pet is active or not. That's kind of useful for a subscription business to do with pets. This is a slide I've changed since yesterday. So I went along to a meetup yesterday of chief data officers in London. And a lot of people in the data community in London at the moment are talking about using tools like this to get your data quality done, or like finish transformation, as though this is something that is done, that is static, that is not going to move. And I think the really great thing that DBT allows you to do, and the paradigm shift that we kind of went through, is that it allows you, we're missing the animation. This should just say change here. to centralize and democratize change. We're not helping to democratize something that is static and is done. We're trying to help lots of people contribute to something that is moving, something that's changing. We talked about documentation in the last talk, about how your documentation is changed 10 times in a week, and you can't just have a static thing that's done. And I think that's definitely true for what we've done. So I'm going to talk about principles, I'm going to talk about productivity, I'm going to talk about reliability, and I'm going to talk about dogs. I have some dog pictures. I was joking to one of the guys earlier, the only reason people come and look at my talks is because I have dog pictures in them. But I think the first three here about principles, productivity, and reliability, and we touched on this in the previous talk, is that DBT is a tool that people use. Right? Yes, it's a technical tool that's going to help you get something done, but fundamentally, all of the things that are going to help you do DBT really well, and some of the things that have helped us do it really well, and some of the things that have helped us do it badly, are all about people. And that's what we're going to focus on. So we talked about DBT as a tool. The principles part of this are tools for you guys. We talked about communication in the last talk, and I think 80% of this is all communication and getting people in the right place. But if you're going to spend 80% of your time communicating about DBT, let's help give you guys some frameworks about how to communicate this, so you can spend that 80% of your time well and efficiently and reuse some code rather than making it up as you go along. So there are 4 principles I want to bring in. One, which is why we went to DBT in the first place, which is to centralize business logic in one place. Try as much as possible to have one definition for your important metrics and keep it in one place. The second one, about being really clear about what your model is for. Sometimes it is right to have 2 models that look like they're the same thing if they have 2 different purposes, and as long as you're clear what those purposes are. 3, test deliberately. This is one of the bits that I'm going to disagree with the past talk. Sorry, Matt. We have very few tests, but we have very few very deliberate tests in particular places when we know they matter. And I'll come on to what that means in a second. And 4, documentation, unsurprisingly. So the first one is around centralizing business logic. There's going to be some familiar faces here. We have some ETL tools. One of them is Fivetran, but we have some others. We have Airflow, which I guess, how many people in the room use Airflow in their business? Lots. That's about half of the room for people on the webcam. We have DBT, and we also use Tableau. This isn't a Tableau sales talk. And a lot of what we think about DBT when we bring it in is about the flow of data. Data flows this way. It comes in ETL tools or ELT tools. Some of it goes through Airflow, some of it doesn't. All of it goes through DBT, and it eventually ends up in Tableau. And one of the things we were thinking about when we're trying to centralize logic is there is logic that lives in all of these 4 steps. There's logic that lives in your ELT tools. Which tables, which sources of data are going to be brought in? There's logic that lives in whatever transformation tools or Airflow that you have. What transformations are being done? What do you choose to move around? Where do you choose to put it? There's obviously logic in DBT. If you use, who in the room uses Tableau and or Looker or similar, right? There are logic in all of those tools. So if you have a Tableau workbook, there will be a query in the background which might have some calculations in it. That is logic. And what we've thought over time is how do we manage the change of this logic? If you're a growing business, the logic of your business is changing every day and every year. And one of the things we've been starting to think about is this idea of logic flow. You can have logic in all of these, but where should it tend towards? And for us, DBT has been that centralizing point of where should the logic move to? That doesn't mean you can't have logic in a Tableau workbook. That doesn't mean you can't have logic in Airflow. That doesn't mean you can't have logic in whatever ELT tool you use. But over time, if it's important logic, it should gradually flow towards DBT so that is the one place that you have it. And I think we recognize that speed means sometimes you put logic in the wrong place and you accumulate some debt. And that's fine, as long as over time you clear up your debt. Also, if anyone has any questions as we go, just heckle. I'm fine with that. Otherwise, you can ask at the end as well. Who was at DBT Meetup 1 in Europe? Who recognizes this diagram? It should be the same group. So Colleen is one of the people on my team, and she talked a lot about what we use models for and how we think about the different levels of this. And broadly for us, we have 5 different schemas that we put our models in. We have a base one down here, which is where we bring everything in. We have a single point for every piece of data that comes in. I think that's probably quite normal for a lot of people. And we started out without this bit in the middle. And we started out without the one at the top. We started out with the bottom one and this core anonymous, which is we were trying to create a nice sensible view that people who didn't have a lot of SQL knowledge could have a safe environment to SQL around in without getting lost and needing to worry about definitions. And that was what this was designed for. It's also called core anonymous because we strip out all of the personal data at that stage as well so that we don't, yes? Fields. Some fields, we work out which fields they are, and they there's one that isn't on here, which is at the side, where we just materialize those fields. But wait, animation. We have some access control here. I'm going to come back to the access control in a second. So we make sure that anything that's in this core view is non-personal data. We can show it to basically anyone we want to, and people can SQL around in it to their heart's content. We then realized that over time, there was a lot of logic in our Tableau workbooks that we needed to put somewhere sensible because it was hard to maintain in Tableau workbooks, and we put that in our reporting view on the top. We then realized that there was there's this kind of layer where we do lots of hard maths in the third one, in this transform one, and that we were getting a bit confused with what is like. Take, for example, we had an idea of an order, and there's one model which we have which is defining, well, when did the order happen? What is it? How big is it? And then there's some other models that are defining, well, what is its relationship to other things? Is it someone's first order, third order, fifth order? And some of that needed to happen really early in the process, and some of it could happen late. And this def layer has been introduced relatively recently to provide that starting point for all of our entities. I could talk for hours about this, but the important bit here is this access control layer. And we talked a little bit before about how to introduce new people to DBT. And for us, we're about a 170-person company, and I think about 10 people have heard the words DBT, the letters DBT. All they see is this. They see the top half of this. They see the effect of DBT. They understand the value of it because they can see these nice, clean views of all the data we have about a pet or an order, but they don't need to worry about the bottom bit until they do, and then we introduce it gradually. Principle number 3, testing deliberately. How many people in the room write SQL on a daily basis? Yeah, we go. What is your most common... Actually, no, I'm going to ask that question in a second. The way we think about tests... The first most likely thing we think to go wrong is joins go wrong. What happens if join goes wrong? Well, you're going to know it with more rows. So we use unique tests a lot. On key models, we say, is the ID still unique? Because if the ID is still unique, your join probably is fine. This is good. Secondly, dependencies and references go wrong. So the model, I'm not going to go back to my pyramid on the previous slide. The reason that we have the pyramid is so that everything depends in the right direction. And we had a problem when we reached about 150, 200 models where we were always getting cyclical references in because someone was like, oh, well, I want this definition for over here, but that definition depends on this definition over here. And we were ending up in these never-ending cycles. And so we had to come up with some rules. And I think it's one of the meta themes, I guess, we're talking about here is we didn't make up all these rules when we first brought in DBT. We've made up the stuff as we go along to solve problems. And this one came up, the testing stuff came up because we had data quality issues. The pyramid came up before because we sat around and we went, guys, we're getting loads of circular references. How are we going to deal with this? And these tools work for us. Feel free to steal them. If they don't work for you, make up some new ones. That's also cool. So tests. We realized that we were having circular references. And so one of the things we've brought in is some tests which check the dependencies of those models and make sure they only depend on models they're allowed to depend on. If you're also using Snowflake, we've open sourced the plugin. The link is at the bottom. If you can't read the text, if you go to the tails.com GitHub account, you'll find it. It's one of our only open source repos. And we've got a blog post on how to use it. The third thing, and I think this is what a lot of people worry about in testing, is raw data goes missing. We had a long think about this, and to some extent, if the raw data's gone missing, making your DBT fail is almost bad, because then you won't know if the problem's getting worse, because you won't be getting new versions of the data for you to check whether the problem's getting worse. We do a few tests around this, but very, very, very few. And lastly, the maths goes wrong. And this is actually the least likely of all of our tests. We have a couple of tests around totals of key metrics. We have a couple of tests that check our historic revenue against a CSV file of what our historic revenue was monthly last year. And if that's all good, everything else is probably good. And I've been hinting along the way that this is increasing likeness. We have many more of these. This is the most likely problem to happen, that our joins have gone wrong. And so we have many more tests about this. And we have very few tests about the maths going wrong because it's much less likely to happen. My question before, what is the most likely problem with your SQL that is not on this diagram? Don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed. It's the same answer for all of us. It's a syntax error. And one of the beautiful things about DBT is it allows us to test that by the virtue of does DBT run? Does it build? Does it actually work? We'll make sure that your syntax error is right, and that is the most common error we have in our DBT base. And I'm going to see if the guys at the back, Alex, Mark, are you nodding or shaking your head? Yeah, they're nodding. This is the most likely error you're going to have. And so work out how to protect yourselves against that rather than the maths going wrong, because that's going to happen a lot less often. Principle number 4, documentation belongs to everyone. We've talked about the inbuilt documentation for DBT. So that's this one in the middle. We have actually, similar to Matt talking about before, we have a link to the most recent version of that that anyone can go access. But I think it's probably the least used of our documentation. The most used, I suspect, is this inline documentation. Literally just comments next to fields. And if you think about where your analysts or whoever is going to spend most of their time with DBT spends most of their time, they don't spend their time in the documentation. They spend their time in the models. So put the documentation where the people are, which is in the models. And one of the things we've been trying to do is in all of our base models, if it matters where the data comes from, put that documentation next to the field, because that's where the person's going to find it that needs to know that information. That may be different for your business, but think about the principle of where it is. The other side of this is that the documentation belongs to everyone. It's not the job of the manager, or it's not my job, or it's not anyone. It's all of our jobs, because it's something that helps all of us. And so one of the things we've been trying to do is encourage people as early as possible in their career at Tails to contribute not just to the models themselves, but to the documentation, and get people into the habit of that early. That's it for principles so far. Anybody want to heckle, or shall I move on? Oh, got some heckling from the back. Yes. I'll repeat the question, but... Oh, catchbox. Ooh. No. Just shout the question. I'll repeat the question.
So the question is, what additional monitoring do you have if you're not running tests on different things? And also, what happens when your tests fail?
Excellent. You have segued perfectly onto my next slide. So if I don't answer the question in 2 slides' time, then wave at me. I'm now going to talk about productivity. We mentioned earlier at the beginning of this talk that DBT is a tool for people. This is a tool about collaboration. If you were a one-person team, you do not need DBT. You can just write the models yourself and deploy them however. The value in DBT is that it's collaborative. That's why the Git integration is so important. And so think about if you've got a lot of people in there, how do you help make those people's lives easier? So I'm going to give you an example of someone on our team. This is Bernie. He is literally this is our lead data scientist dog, Bernie. He is on team data. He likes insights. He does not speak Python. He doesn't like waiting, and he is a good boy. He's also the reason that one of the people on my team isn't here tonight, because she couldn't get a dog sitter. So the kind of daily workflow, how are the people who are using DBT day in, day out, what does their workflow look like? And this is what it looks like for us, and I'm going to call out some of the issues along the way. So you have a business problem. Someone says, hey, France is broken, or I don't understand why this thing has gone up. They're going to go and query some models. They're going to go and do some analysis, write some SQL, see if they can find an answer. They're probably going to then go, ugh, the field I need isn't there, or it's only in this other model that I need, and they're going to need to edit it. And they're going to edit the DBT models, they're going to save it, and they're going to test their edits locally, because they're a great person like that, aren't we? But then they're going to find, what, you mean test it live? Like on the live, but then if I break it, then I'm going to break all of the models that everyone's querying at the moment. So no, we have sandboxed environments for each user, and I think if you don't, one of the first things I suggest anyone does when they start using DBT is make sure everyone on your team has credentials that point to a different schema in your data warehouse, so they can all deploy in their own schema. Great. So we did that. Wait, no. The last time they tried to test their models was 5 commits ago, and someone else has committed a model that this one depends on, and so they need to make sure that their models are up to date. One of the things that, and we actually didn't have this for almost a year of using DBT until it got such a bad problem. And I'll get onto this in more detail in a second, but we ended up building a little microservice to manage how DBT goes. And if anyone's interested in doing that, grab me afterwards. I can talk you through exactly how we did it. But it allows people to go into the Linux space and say, hey, here's my credentials. I want you to build the most recent version of DBT in my schema so that when I come back to it after I've made a cup of tea or been to a meeting and I've closed my laptop doesn't need to be open. I can come back and I have some models to actually test on. Wait, no, there's another problem, but I'm on a Windows laptop and my Python environment's messed up. So we also, and I think this comes back to kind of bringing software development practices into your analytics team. We have like run scripts, and we've Dockerized this so that it's environment independent and it can run on any platform. Okay, so they've tested it locally, they're happy, or maybe they haven't. They've committed it to a branch, and then they want to test it remotely, and we use the same service that we talked about before, to test it again, and we've set that up so it works. Then they commit to master, or maybe they don't put it on a branch, and they just commit straight to the master branch because they're being lazy. And then it tests. So we talked about why a DBT test is important, and I think they really come into their fore, and we kind of touched on this a little bit in the previous talk, when you can use it to continuously deploy analytical changes and changes to your models. And so one of the things that our system does at the moment is it will take any commit and start testing that commit on its own and check whether it worked. Did it pass the test? Did it successfully build? If it does, it flags it as great. This is good. And then that one gets deployed straight away to our live models, and then it recurs hourly. So every hour, we're building the most recent successful version, and as soon as someone's committed another one that passed the tests, that one takes its place, and that one will every hour go through this process of being built. In the early days, we did not have all of this. I think we had probably like everything on the bottom row here, and we've kind of hodgepodged this together over several months of gradually extending it. I think now DBT Cloud's in a much better place than 19 months ago, so I'd definitely check that out. But also, a lot of this stuff isn't rocket science. And I think if you think how much time your software team, if you have a software team in your business, spends doing DevOps on their stuff, take 10% of that time and ask them to do some DevOps for your analytics team, and it will be time well spent. And I think some of the principles that are behind this likewise comes back to the people side of it. Let your analysts be analysts, not software developers. Think about DevOps with data. Your analysts probably won't think about DevOps because they don't know what DevOps is. So script repetitive tasks, help save their time. They will love you for it. Abstract away the environment. Most of your team doesn't need to know whether you're running DBT 1.14.0 or 1.14.1. It's just not important. What they do need to know is whether their build works and whether the code and the logic they're putting in there is good. Likewise, tests are there to help you move faster. They should give you confidence to take bigger steps, to try more adventurous things, because you know if you step wrong, the test will fail and it won't go live and you won't break everyone's stuff and someone won't come screaming at you because their report doesn't work. And tests are there as a safety net, not as a restrictive thing. And if you have loads of tests and they're becoming restrictive, get rid of them, right? They should be there to help you move faster. And delays break flow. Think about in all of these processes how you can reduce the amount of time it takes for something to get live and be done. And the quicker things can get out, the quicker you can... who's come across the concept of the OODA loop? It's one of my new favorites. Nice. Yeah, exactly. You know why. It's a concept from military science developed by a guy called John Boyd, which is a loop from observe, orient, decide, act, and round and round. And it came from fighter plane design where they realized that there was a slower plane that was beating all of the faster planes, and it was because it was more maneuverable. And the people in these planes could orient, decide, and act quicker than the faster planes, and so they were winning. And I think about how you can help anyone on your team make a decision and see the effects of that decision quicker so they can make another decision and they can go back and they can reiterate quicker and quicker and quicker. Finally, reliability. which isn't about reliability. It's about monitoring, alerting, and metrics. So reliability is a thing about software. Monitoring, alerting, and metrics are how you help your people help your software be reliable. So we have a dashboard, right? We're a data team. Have a dashboard for your data, which says, look, here's a load of people deploying stuff. These are all failing. They're yellow. And anyone on the team can go in and find out why their deployment is failing. But in the meantime, the most live one is still going. They can also go in and look at the logs and say, okay, well, I can see any line that's got the words fail in it in capital letters is highlighted nice in red. So they're easy to find when you're scrolling through 3 pages of logs. Just to say, back to that principle before, how do you save people time and help them get to the answers they need quicker so they can make changes? And when the live one fails, there's a Slack alert in our main team channel, right where everyone's having the conversation about whether it's time to go for lunch, so that everybody knows that the real one is failing and someone needs to do about it. And lastly, we have a legit dashboard where we track some metrics about this. Can anyone actually read the numbers? I'm assuming not. You can just see some pretty pictures, right? Right. Briefly, let me talk you through what this is for. I'm going to start. The webcam won't see me. So start on the right. There's a graph here that has the build time to every individual model. You can see the big green line, which went up 2 weeks ago. Someone introduced a new model. It was very computationally intensive. It took ages to build, and then we optimized it, and it went down. And people can see the results of the work they do there. Likewise, you can see in the middle, this middle gray line is about the total time for the build itself. How long is that taking? Is that going up? Or is that going down? And giving people the ability to see that and track it, because it turns out your analysts love data. So give them data on how productive they're being, and they'll do something about it. And finally, this one in the bottom left is a more in-depth version of the one on the right to really flag up, okay, we have 3 models here which are deep red and take a lot of time to build, and maybe we should do something about them. Recap. So we've been talking about principles. What are the principles to help your people be productive with DBT? We've talked about productivity. How do you help your people be productive with the DBT they're doing, and so that they adopt it quicker? Ooh, no, spoilers. We talked about reliability. We talked about dogs. All of this is about people. This is what I encourage anyone who's thinking about bringing DBT in, and I guess this is to some extent the moral of the previous talk as well. When you're thinking about bringing in DBT or you're thinking about getting it out, the tool is great, the tool is cool, but the tool is just a tool. And think about how to help the people use the tool well. Finally, this is my obligatory hiring slide. If you want to change the world of pet food for good, if you want to work with a mature DBT deployment and you like dogs, we are hiring. This is us. This dog isn't actually one of our actual dogs. We realized on our rebrand we needed to get some more photogenic dogs. But I have a phone full of pictures of dogs, actual office dogs. I think we've got about 10 dogs in the office every day. So, yeah, that's it.